Thank you for joining the October 1st, 2019 VOLTHA call. Just a reminder to everyone that these meetings are public and recorded, and we do post them to the YouTube channel after the meeting. So please be mindful of that during discussions and if we have any presentations today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with today's agenda. The first part of today's call, I want to familiarize everyone with a number of changes that we've made to JIRA over the last couple of weeks, trying to reorganize it and optimize it for the surge effort that's going to be going on for the VOLTHA coding. So I wanted to make sure everyone's aware of the changes and what we're trying to accomplish with some of these things. Hopefully it will streamline some of the meetings and streamline some of the use of the JIRA tool as well. And then following that, this will be where we start our first meeting where we're going to be shifting over to the Brigade Updates. And so I do have a list of the brigades on here. I don't know if the test automation one has actively kicked off yet, but I do have that added on the list as well. And then with remaining time, then we'd be looking at new JIRAs that are not related to any of the current brigades. And so just a reminder related to that, if a new JIRA issue is opened up and it falls under the scope of an active brigade, our expectation is that it's going to be reviewed during that brigade meeting. Any questions on the agenda before we get started looking at the changes to the JIRA boards? Okay, then first thing I want to take a look at is the component list. So we've done some modification there and trying to do some cleanup. And let me find the right tab. So this is a list of the components. You can see you can find it here as well on the board. A list of what we've done with reorganizing the components. So we've tried to move things around to make them more descriptive and more accurate and make sure they're referring to components, not to functionality or features instead. And so we have our new listing here. A couple key things to note. I'll point out here, we do have the Onu apps broken out by each app. And then the OLT adapter, we've broken that into agent and adapter portion for that, OpenOLT adapter, OpenOLT agent. And then if we move down, you can see there's also one added in for protos. The core, we've broken that into the read-write core and read-only core. And scrolling down a little bit further, there's one added in for testing. Also added one for unknown. For example, if you open up a ticket and you're not sure what the component is that's going to be impacted by a defect that you open, for example, you can open it as unknown until we have more information on it. So down at the bottom, these last few here, VOLTHA adapter, VOLTHA core, those we are looking to have those deprecated from use. They're associated with a lot of the old tickets. For example, back in the early days, the JIRA issues used to be labeled with CORD instead of VOL. And so before they were migrated to a separate project, these components were used, I think, at that point to identify them as part of this project. So we've tried to remove the use of those from new issues. So at one point, I think we'll be renaming these with some indicator to indicate that they're no longer planned for use, and trying to shift again, like for adapters, to either the ONU adapter or to the OLT agent or OLT adapter, and so forth.
Julie, can you refresh the page?
Yes.
Those now all have deprecated in front of them.
Thank you.
They are sorted then.
Here we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Up at the top. Thank you. Okay, so we're trying to go in and as we see things opened up, trying to remap them to the new component name. So we'll continue to do that in the background. But as everyone gets familiar with the new listing, hopefully that will streamline some of the work and searches that are being done later. Any questions from the group on the component list? And if you're going through and you find that we missed something in creating this list, please let us know so we can get the component added if we need to do that also. Okay, so that's a snapshot of what we have for the components. Next, I want to talk about labels. So I'll be going to a board just because it's easy to display some of them there that I'll talk about in more detail later, but this dashboard actually has a list of the labels that are in use for the open issues, I think. Or actually some of them are resolved as well. So not all of these labels you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, not all of these are ones we want to target for continued use. We're still doing some cleanup. We've mapped things over from a number of labels that were, for example, reflecting the same information as the Epoch they were under or as the component that they were related to. So we've tried to minimize duplication of info in that way and moving to a more streamlined set of labels for use with the project. So the rework on the labels is still in progress, but I do want to point out a few key ones here. So stabilization, this one is used heavily by the Stabilization Brigade to drive that work that David's leading. And then also, we're looking at verify was opened. I think that may be a good one to still use to flag items that need to be re-verified after a patch has been submitted, or to see if it was fixed by something else or if it's no longer reproducible. We have one other one I want to point out here, all discuss. This is one that we'll be using to drive items for discussion on these Tuesday calls primarily. And so these are items, if you're on a brigade and you find an item that needs to be bubbled up for discussion with a larger team, you can flag it with this all discuss label, and then that will make it visible on this board for Tuesday discussions. So we have a sample one here where Zach added that to the VOLTHA documentation Epoch. You can see it showing up here as all discuss under the labels. And then that would make it visible when we go onto the Tuesday calls. If we use this screen, we can easily navigate to those items to discuss with the group. So all discuss, we think, will be a key one to use for the group, as well as stabilization is heavily being used at the moment. And we'll have more clarification coming later, but the label streamlining work is still in progress, so please bear with us on that. Any questions on labels?
Okay. Julie, I have a question. Should the person that opened the task put this label on the task, or somebody else like brigade owners or you will put this labels? I mean, if I have on the task and think that it is about stabilization, should I put the stabilization label on it, or David should put it?
David, I'll let you answer for stabilization if you want. David, are you on the bridge? Let me check.
For what it's worth, I know we talked about adding a triage label as well for bugs specifically. Just if we're in a situation where we're not really quite sure what's affected, we kind of have to look at it in a triage sense. So there may be a label kind of like all discuss for items that really just aren't clear where they need to go. But again, per label, like Julie said, it may be kind of the owner of the brigade that may have something to say about it, whether it's included or not. And if it is included, at least, let the brigade owner know that their scope just increased at a minimum.
Yeah, so I guess it's that unknown label as well, right? Is that what would be used for that?
Yeah, that's what Matt was referring to with the triage. We don't have any with that currently assigned, so probably we should put one in as a dummy one or test one on a ticket so that it populates in the list.
Yeah, I can do that, Julie.
Okay, thank you.
Just speaking, I think that for most of the labels, the person filing the bug should do that. But for the all discuss label, I'd prefer if that gets assigned during during the brigade itself. So you bring your issue to a brigade. If everyone can't decide or they think it needs elevated, you put all discuss on it there. And that way there's at least some pre-discussion that happens. And if like a proposal needs to be made or something needs to be hashed out within the brigade, it can happen. And then sort of that preparation step can happen before bringing it to everyone. So maybe all you really want is a rubber stamp from the whole group. That could be one of the all discuss reasons why you'd all discuss something. Another reason would be because you have literally, there's some sort of not a conflict, but something that you need more of the group to help decide. So that said, assign all discuss in brigades, but everything else feel free to use. That's just my opinion. Any other thoughts?
I think the idea here is, just in general, in organizing work, right? When you have to look at a list of 1,000 items, it becomes kind of onerous to figure out what's really going on. Whereas if we kind of organize around brigades and epochs, and things kind of bubble up and bubble down through those constructs, it ends up being easier from a summary level to kind of get a handle on scope and tracking and what's going on, while still maintaining the autonomy of individuals working within a brigade at the same time. So if anybody has any suggestions for good labels, again, we're open to them. But yeah, these are kind of the ideas, trying to stay away from so much component duplication of labels and more towards a label that might kind of be a cross section of many things. Like stabilization is a cross section of many components or many features. High availability, and there are others as well that may be kind of that go across a bunch.
Any other questions? Let me do a refresh here.
Julie, just maybe not a question,
yes.
more a contribution to this message. So, of course, labels are open for everyone to use, and use your common sense to assign labels. And generally, labels aren't limited, so you can easily add new ones or change them easily. Any user can do that. So I guess just one point is be mindful of the multiplication of these labels. And when you change them, when you remove anything, or if you're adding a new one, just maybe have an extra check on this dashboard to see what other labels are used. Maybe there's a bit better fitting label already available that's being used across multiple stories. And also bear in mind that labels are case sensitive. So whether you capitalize the first letter or not will actually make a difference whether this label will come up in the search functions and filters. Just
right. As an example, you see both Onos, all caps, and Onos here. And these are ones I think probably will go away at some point with cleanup when we finish that effort, is that's really referring more to component apps, I believe, at this point. So we wouldn't need a label specifically for it if the components are identified. And so we still have some cleanup to do here, but I think mainly we'll be using a small set. We've cleaned up, I think it's 49 labels to make this screen more manageable. And then, like I said, stabilization is going to be a key one. I think verify may be a key one as we move further along, and then all discuss, and then others as needed. I think feature is also used by the Stabilization Brigade to differentiate between feature-related items in that brigade and defects. Other questions on labels? And I see the triage one shows up now. So we can use the triage one if there are questions about what needs to be done with it. Okay, let me go on to the next item. We've also done reorganization of the epochs, and we've taken some closed out ones that were complete or nearly complete Let me get to the screen I want here. And let's see, all issues, there we go. So we've reorganized the epics, opened up new ones where it made sense, closed out ones that were complete. There were some that were where it made sense to take maybe a few remaining items out and map them to a new epic and close out the old one. So we do have a more streamlined list of epics that are remaining open. And so those, I've just gone to the backlog view so that we could take a quick look here and you can see those epics. And then those should populate as you look to assign an epic. What we're looking for is to make sure that we have an epic assigned for every issue that's opened. And so there are a few that we need to go in. I looked earlier this morning, a few we need to go in and clean up. But once that's done, we should hopefully be back in the state where everything has an epic. Related to that, I want to point out one of the ones that we added was this maintenance epic. So this is one that we can use for all of the bugs, and maintenance tasks can be mapped over to this maintenance epic so that we don't have an orphan issue without an epic. So that one helps with a lot of the cleanup we had. A couple other items, I'll just point out one here, the ONU Software Upgrade. This is one where it used to be part of the OMCI epic, and it was one of the remaining items to be covered there. So it seemed to make sense at this point to pull that into its own epic, and then we closed out, I believe, the OMCI framework one, and then additional work would come in as separate epics, for example. Let me see if there are any other specific ones we needed to look at. So we've got the porting OpenOLT to Golang. We have Brigade-related ones, test automation. Maintenance is a new one. Scale and performance tasks. FCAPS is a large one being looked at by a Brigade. In-band support, that was pulled into a separate epic. We've got the multicast and multi-tcont Brigade related epic, documentation, release engineering. A couple of the new ones, multiple NNI ports support. That one I believe was promoted to an epic as well. I think it was a story before. We've done a grouping for other access technologies to cover things like EPON and G.fast, for example. That would be another place we could put future support with other access technologies. They could go under here until they're at a point where they can be broken off into their own independent epic. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of the rework on the epics. So when you're opening a new issue, please go in and make sure that you've picked an epic to go in with it. And if it's a defect, then typically you would just be opening that with the maintenance epic or assigning the maintenance epic. Questions on the epic restructuring?
So what's the process to create a new epic? And is there, that goes through a review, I assume?
I don't believe there's a restriction in JIRA for who can open one. Zach, is that correct?
There is not. So sometimes somebody will make a story or a task, and it gets bigger than just that one task, and it needs to be turned into an epic. So I would probably recommend, if you think there's some work that needs to be done, file JIRA, and then if it needs to get bigger, we can turn it into an epic and rework the task. Starting a brand new epic from scratch, that may happen, and that probably will happen in the meetings or directed by the G5, depending on the other schedules that we have. So in general, most users should probably not need to create epics, but I would ask in one of the meetings time to time if that's needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
For example, with some of the new items we'll have coming in, I think mostly they'll be covered under brigades for new functionality. But if you've been assigned to create the stories to support new functionality, part of that may be grouping them under an epic. But again, I think most of that's going to be driven through the brigades, so hopefully they will give direction there as well.
And
yeah.
Yeah, so any story in JIRA can be converted into an epic. So if you're in doubt and you think it might be an epic, might be a story, just create a story, add all the information into the story that you think is relevant. Add the label all discuss and bring it for discussion to a meeting. And then in a meeting, we could decide whether to convert it into epics and add stories to it or tasks and so on.
Yes, thanks, Carol. Other questions? Okay, next I want to take a look at versions. So our planning slides we had from April and our versioning that we had there, that's now changed a bit. So 2.1, actually, let's see, maybe a better way for me to look at this. Let me go over to this screen. 2.1, you'll see, is now focused on stability with a target release date at the end of the year. And then 2.2 is where we're planning for the new functionality to come in. So the new features plus additional stability work and deployment readiness. So 2.1 and 2.2 are both versions that are available to plan items into. If it's going to be handled by most of the items for the Stabilization Brigade fall under the 2.1 category. So likely going to be targeted for that. Then if items are not being worked as part of this near-term effort, these first two items, then we're assigning it to future right now. So this is another key thing for making our dashboards that we'll talk about in a minute work properly, is making sure we have one of those releases assigned to the target version. I went to the wrong screen because we have the filters set up to bring in 2.1 and 2.2, for example, for visibility on the screens. And then future is, I think on some items it's there, but on others it is filtered out, depending on which board we're looking at the moment. So when you're opening a ticket, if you know if it's new functionality, then most likely that's going to be going into 2.2, unless it's a future item that is not planned for this early phase development. 2.1 is where I believe you'll see most of the defects entered in. Thoughts from the group or corrections from anyone if I've misstated? Okay, I'm not hearing any comments. So let me go on to the next. So I'm sure some of you will be happy to hear this. We are moving away from sprints for our effort at this time. And so while I still use the old board, you'll see there are no active sprints, but this is the easiest place for some things to look at in terms of the backlog. You'll see we do have filters mapped up here for stabilization, non-stabilization issues, and then also the all discuss as well. And so feel free to continue to use this board for lots of sorting and filtering. It is useful for many things. And Zach, thanks for creating these additional quick filters for us. That helps us with our effort as well. We also can filter on high priority items. And then on this screen, of course, you can limit it to specific releases or specific epics if those are particular interest for you as well. Then what we have done now is we're moving for the surge development, we're moving to using the Kanban board. So that has been created, and you can see you can flip between both of them if you haven't done that before. Over here on the left-hand side, you can go back and forth between the two. Also on the boards up at the top, I believe you can switch between those as well. So the Kanban board, we've got our to-do items, in progress, resolved. You'll see many of those similar filters up here. Anything that's been flagged for discussion with the entire group is under that all discussed label that filters here. If it's been targeted for 2.2, then we've got that list of items filtered here. We've got our to-do, in progress, and then the completed items. 2.1 gives us another filter. And then we also have our stabilization filter and non-stabilization. So for example, if I pick not stabilization, see I have a much smaller list that's targeted for 2.1. And then also we have list, if you want to look for something that's unassigned, if you're trying to find something to work on, then you can use the unassigned filter in order to pull up that list as well. You'll also see that we do have at the top, the blocking issues or blockers have been sorted up to the top, and then high priority items following after that, and then everything with less than high priority follows in the lowest section of the board. And looks like we have a little cleanup to do here as well, because on the 2.1, we do have some in progress items that are unassigned. So if it's in progress, we probably need to find out who's working on those and get the name associated with it. So we have a little cleanup to do still on that. We'll try and get that done after the call. So I think this board is going to be used for much of the Tuesday meetings. It may be used for some of the brigade meetings as well, since we can't filter on stabilization. But again, I think we'll use it for this all discussed to pull up topics for discussion with the group and other planning purposes as well. So do we have questions from the group on this board?
Kind of just a general question. As we go on, the resolved column is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm wondering if this page is going to have a hard time loading. And maybe just a general JIRA question, but is there some way of managing that?
There is a way to limit it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I put a date limit, so it only lists the last 2 weeks worth of resolved issues. So it has a lot right now, but in as we pass our big refactoring and remarking of everything, that's going to get much smaller.
And there's one more functionality on Kanban board, which is release. You can see it in the right top corner over there. So if you use that, then you can get to the functionality which allows you to release a batch of completed stories or completed tasks, and just need to check which release would be released but if you click through, then it has a dialog window opens up, which allows you to choose what kind of release you actually want to release, and then these are removed from your backlog, so they don't show up on the board anymore once you've created a release. We may or may not use it, depending on, we can discuss further whether that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Zach. And as Zach mentioned, since we've been doing a lot of closing out items, marking items that won't be fixed, and cleaning up items that were already done but not marked as resolved, we have a lot in this resolved column from the past couple of weeks. But as we move out a little bit, this should become a more manageable list. But right now, I think we'll all agree it's pretty large, but that should clean up in a bit. Okay, other questions or comments on this board? And just to point out to everyone, you can go to the component list from this screen as well. No change from the previous board there. Both views have that. Okay, then let me go back to the agenda. Next, I want to talk about the Brigade Dashboard. So the other item we've been doing that you may find useful if you're working in the brigades, for example, is we've created Brigade Dashboard. So we also have one sort of generically labeled non-Brigade Dashboard, which is really for items that would be discussed during this call. At this point, items that don't fit cleanly into a brigade effort. We do have Brigade Dashboard set up for the BAL work in progress on 3.x, for multicast, multi-tcont. There are a couple different boards for stabilization. I think the one you really want most time is going to be the Brigade Stabilization one down here, the Onu FCAPS Brigade, Pod Management and VOLTHA FCAPS, and then also BB-SIM. And then I'm expecting we'll get a test automation one as well once that formally kicks off. Zach, is that what you would be expecting as well?
That's correct. I just haven't made it yet.
Right. So that's still, I think, in the works, but then that will take some items off of the non-Brigade dashboard as well, because right now those items show up here. So if you have not worked with the dashboards before, how you can find them is go up to the top, go to the dashboards, go under Manage Dashboards, and then I've already labeled all of these as favorites for myself. If you go to the popular list, these ones that have been added in recently, they should most generally are going to show up at the top because a number of us have been working with them over the past week or so. And so here you can see the various brigade ones, and then if you want it to show up in your list each time, then just flag it as a favorite for yourself. So here's removing it, add it back in as a favorite. And once you've done that, you've got your list of favorites, and then when you're going to a dashboard view, then your list of favorites will populate along the left-hand side for you, and you can switch between the ones of interest for yourself. So hopefully this will help with the management of the brigades. And so I believe these are filtered to include just 2.1 and 2.2 tagged items. Is that correct, Zach?
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. And also for where it crosses across to SIBA board. So like this multicast board has some SIBA items. It will grab the, I believe, the SIBA next, but it does not include the future. So if you there's some item that is out of scope, put it in the future version in either board. And also, if you need these boards changed or the filters changed, ask me. Unfortunately, JIRA doesn't let me assign ability to change some of the filters and boards to anyone or to the brigade lead. So ask me, and I can make any changes or fix-ups you need.
Thanks, Zach. And again, kind of pointing back to some of the earlier discussion on epics and on the releases for the target fix field, since these filters are all driven for these dashboards are driven off of those things being populated, if we don't have that target release of either 2.1 or 2.2, and if we don't have the epic associated that would pull it into an active brigade, then it's not going to show up on the list for visibility. So that's why we just want to make sure that we're getting those items populated when we have the new tickets that are opened up. Otherwise, we have them kind of in the background and not visible for folks who are working with the dashboards. Okay, so I think the quick thing to point out here, it's pretty obvious. We've got the list of issues that are targeted for that specific brigade. You can filter it on the various different fields. In progress is going to show up on top here. Resolved is next, so you can always reverse it if you want to find the to-do items and populate those up to the top. Or you can filter by priority if you want to find the high priority items and see if there are any to do. So you can work off of this screen as well. Just find your personal preference for which of the various boards or dashboards works best for you with your individual work with JIRA. It may be using a combination of several of them. And then as the work gets done, you'll see that we do have a chart on the left that gives a quick snapshot view of where it is in the development work. So I'll switch over to this one. For example, with pod management, VOLTHA FCAPS, you can see we continue to have new issues created as we're going along, but we do have ones being closed out, so you can see those tracking on the screen. Okay, so questions on the dashboards. Hopefully everyone knows how to find them and add them to their screens if they are interested in looking at these views in JIRA. Any questions?
Actually, it's worth pointing out again that while you're looking at the dashboards on the VOLTHA board, the dashboards actually go across project boards. So you will see, like on this dashboard, there's stories that are VOL something, and then there are also other stories that are SIBA something. And so if you actually looked at the SIBA board, it would have shown that the SIBA stories, basically all ONOS-based things and other things like BBSIM are not tracked in VOLTHA, they're tracked on the SIBA board. There's a similar version name that has been associated with what do we call SIBA Next. It's basically everything that needs to go and align with VOLTHA 2.2. So in general, you don't, if you're only working on ONOS stories, then the place to enter them would be the SIBA board, but it'll automatically show up in this particular dashboard. And you know, the group of 5 should be able to help you organize things so that the dashboard is king over here for the brigades, and so we should be able to reflect, you know, things that are going across projects.
Thanks, Saurav. Any other comments or questions on the dashboards? Okay, I think that takes us through the bulk of the changes that we've been doing with JIRA to make it hopefully more functional for the team during this surge effort. And again, if you see things we've missed, please let us know so that we can you know, make changes to filters, changes to dashboards, or other things if we have missing components, for example, as well. Okay, with that, then I think we'll move on to Brigade Updates. So Scott, do we have you on the bridge?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, if you could give an update on what's going on with the pod management, VOLTHA FCAPS Brigade, that would be great.
Sure. So the brigade's working on, I think, 4 areas right now. One of them is the Redfish importer. This gets information from Redfish and pushes it to Kafka. And mostly what the brigade is working on there is testing and documenting sort of issues. So I think the basic importer is written and it's just sort of being stabilized, tested, documented, etc. The next area we're working on is a Kafka topic exporter, which will take stories from that Redfish importer and push them to Prometheus. There also is an integration effort there because the exporter needs to work with the Redfish importer. And then we have, we're working on operational status, optical data, various on-demand APIs that will fetch information from the ONT on an on-demand basis, things such as optical temperatures and such. And finally, the brigade has a lot of alarm stories. So there's stories both on fetching specific alarms, as well as stories about adding things like alarm filtering and squelch and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we're working on. Is there more detail or less detail you would like, or is that good?
Julie, could you pull up the brigade dashboard for these brigades while we're looking at them?
Get over to the right screen.
I guess as we kind of get used to the new cadence, maybe one of the things we cover, if there's anything within a brigade that is a sticking point, like if there's 1 or 2 issues, either from a design or story or bug point of view that, you know, have lingered too long, or, you know, that really kind of need, you know, bubbling up, might be good to, you know, have that easily viewed here, and then we can talk about it during these twice a week calls.
I can create a filter, or I can create a little section in here that bubbles up all the things that are marked as all discussed within each brigade. Will that be useful? Or would that do what you're talking about, Matt?
I think so. That and priority. I mean, if we make better use of priority, I know in the past we've kind of been loosey-goosey with our priorities. If we actually, make them meaningful between priority and all discuss, we should have a good view of what really is a problem.
Okay, I'll work on that.
But anyway, that's about all I had. I don't think the brigade has any current sticking points. We have had design discussions in the past that we brought forth to the VOLTHA call, but nothing that we're currently blocked on.
Okay, thanks, Scott. And speaking of design discussions, I'll just take a moment to say I believe Saurav is looking at targeting some discussions in the next few weeks here, but I don't have the detailed list of the order in which this will occur. So more info on that for our future calls. Okay.
Yes, I haven't just gotten to it. There's at least 3 or 4 items that I think we need to start discussing more urgently. So I will be reaching out to the community to schedule those discussions on the Thursday calls. The other thing that I wanted to talk about before we leave the pod management and VOLTHA FCAS brigade is that there are a number of unassigned stories over there. There is a need for adding more resources to this particular brigade, and that's part of the work that the CIBA Surge team, with the committed resources we have as part of the Surge team. I will be reaching out to a few of you. I've already reached out to a few, but I'll be reaching out to the rest and assigning such resources to that brigade to take up some of the many unassigned tasks over there. So that should happen this week as well.
Great, thanks, Saurav. And you folks may have seen me just do that here. If you're looking for something to pick up for the brigade and you want to look at the unassigned list, you go down to this filter in the bottom left and you click on the number of unassigned items under unresolved. Then that takes you to a filter that gives you that list of issues. So you can search from there for specific items as well. So that's another tool that can be used off of the dashboard. Okay, then the next brigade update would be on multicast and multiple TCONT support. I'm not sure if Girish or Saurav is going to give an update there.
This is Scott. If I could add just one more point
sure.
I wanted to make on pod management. We do have a meeting Mondays at 8 a.m. Anyone who wants to join the meeting, let me know. We do also have an email thread. Anyone who would like to be included on the email thread, it's very helpful if you're working on the issues. Just let me know. That would be Scott Baker. You can find me on Slack or on email. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Scott. That's 8 a.m. Pacific time on Mondays. Okay, for the multicast and multiple TCONT brigade, Girish or Saurav, I'm not sure which of you was planning to give updates for that.
I can start, probably Saurav can add.
Okay.
So there has been some work in progress for a lot of Onu applications, especially the core MCAST, SADIS, OLT app, and also the OLT pipeline driver. And a lot of this code is already under review. And also we should have the code for multi-TCONT support shortly up for review. And we also need to review the multicast, multi-TCONT dashboard, because we still feel that a lot of the stories, especially for testing and changes to BabySim for multi-TCONT and multicast is not covered. So we feel a lot of stories are still missing. We will be reviewing the existing stories shortly and adding more stories which we feel are missing. But a lot of the code is already under review. I think the graph is probably not as bad as it looks because a lot of things have progressed much. So that's all I can add for now. Saro, you want to add something?
No, I think you covered most of the things. The problem with the multicast and multi-T-count work was that it was done in Netsia in VOLTHA 1.x, and now that work needs to be ported onto VOLTHA 2.x. So a lot of the stories are unresolved because that porting work has to happen. So, and like Girish pointed out, we need to carefully review all the stories that are under this and clean things up. So we look forward to reporting the next time about where we are really with this brigade.
Great, thanks for that update, and good also pointing out that we know the effort had gone on the 1.x, and so this is tracking just, I believe, the items as that work is ported over to 2.x now.
Yeah, that's 2.2 actually.
Yeah,
so VOLTHA master that will eventually become 2.2.
Are there any BAL 3.x dependencies with any multicast, multi-T-count work?
There is actually. There is a dependency on BAL 3.1. So the BAL 3.1 brigade, which we haven't talked about yet, but we are actually fairly close to validating 3.1, and at some point this brigade will then transfer over to verifying things on hardware with BAL 3.1. So these are just multiple parallel work streams. Even the stabilization brigade at some point will flip over to using BAL 3.1 once the BAL 3.1 brigade says that things have been verified and they're okay.
Cool, thank you.
Does it make sense for us to just go ahead and talk about the BAL 3.x Brigade Dashboard next then, in status?
Sure.
Okay, we'll switch over there.
Yes, so the BAL 3.x Brigade, so most of the work is actually complete. So the goal for us initially was to port all the changes or the features that are working with BAL 2.6 to work with BAL 3.x. So the developers have tested locally, and all the basic use cases seem to work fine. But before we, merge these changes to master, we would want to, do a sanity with SEBA 2.0 at ONF. Basically, run the automation test suite, run all the test cases that were run for SEBA before SEBA 2.0 release. So we have just set up the pod. And I think the test should, we are just about to run these test cases. So once we get a green signal from the SEBA 2.0 automation test suite, these changes are good to merge to master. But if we hit any roadblocks, I think we would want to fix them first before they get merged. So all of these changes are currently under work in a separate branch. So once we fix all the issues, these are good to merge to master.
Great, thanks for that update. Any questions from the group?
I guess this is testing with the adapter, at least the 1.x adapter for OpenOLT. Has any testing been done with the 2.x OpenOLT adapter?
Yes, one of the developers in the brigade is working to test with 2.1, but all of the sanity was verified with 1.7.
Okay, and I guess conformance to the proto has been held, right? No major proto changes, no proto changes at all?
There were no proto changes at all, so in theory it should work with 2.x, but I will wait for the developer in the brigade to confirm before I claim that.
Good deal, thank you.
Yeah, how about testing for the technology profiles for like the AT&T model with 4 gems and single T-con? Is that been tested?
Yes, so we have tested 1T-con4 gem model. Yes, I think that's our default model when we test.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they're also part of the automated tests, so they're well covered actually. But different parameters for different things, maybe we're still lacking on that. So there is a 1T-con4 gem model that we use, but we haven't actually tried say 1T-con8 gems or different parameters for each of the gem ports in terms of the schedulers. So the coverage may be lesser, but it is part of it is there.
There was an issue with the downstream queues in 2.6. Is that fixed in the 3.1?
Yes, so there were a couple of issues. So we had issues with packet duplication, and one more was when we, continuously added the subscriber, removed the subscriber for multiple iteration. We used to see an error in BAL. So we don't see those issues anymore with BAL 3.x. So, but we would ideally want to confirm that in our sanity test, probably run the regression and confirm that those issues are indeed not reproducible.
Okay, thanks.
And also one more update to, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one more update is the OpenOLT agent didn't have any unit test suite. So we have added a unit test framework, and we would want to achieve as much coverage as possible with OpenOLT agent in OpenOLT agent under unit tests.
One correction, there may be a need for changing the protos for multicast. So I'm not sure the VOLTHA 2.1 and 2.2 will be compatible in terms of protos for the multicast group adding.
Yes, that is correct. Actually, 2.1, VOLTHA 2.1 should be okay with 1.7 compatibility. It's VOLTHA 2.2 that where the new multicast and multi-T-con features are going to come in. That's where we would need to change the protos.
But I believe it should still be backward compatible because there are going to be new RPCs and new messages. Are the existing messages going to be impacted?
I don't believe so.
Yeah,
but I could be wrong. Yeah. So you're right. Yes. It should be backward compatible. Are we correct, Sarkant?
So, I'm not sure of that. Burak is in the bridge. Maybe he can tell something about it.
Question again.
The protos in the 2.2 for multicast. Did we change any functions in protos, or it's just new functions in the protos?
New for multicast functionality, actually.
Okay.
But as long as it's a master
between VOLTHA 2. Or 1.7 or 2.x. In terms of multicast functionality, the protos will change for sure.
Sure. I think as long as we target it towards, VOLTHA Protos master and, both the adapters and the core master, it fits with 2.2. So again, as long as we're all aligned on, feature proto movement, that makes perfect sense. We just don't want to try to make, newer protos work with older agent and older adapter and it, have some unexpected failure. But in master, it makes perfect sense.
Agreed.
Other questions on the BAL Brigade, BAL 3.x Brigade? Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left, so five minutes left. So we may not be able to touch on all of these. We may have to carry a couple over So we've got the Stabilization Brigade, we've got Onu FCAPS, BBSIM, and then I don't think we would probably have one yet for test automation. Should we go to the Stabilization Brigade quickly?
Okay, quickly. We have a Stabilization Brigade. We're working to get VOLTHA to a point where it behaves consistently and correctly, both in terms of bug finding and hunting, as well as building out an automation test framework for both unit as well as system integration tests. So help, come help. We need help. Lots of bugs to fix. There you go. That's quick.
Great.
Meetings Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific.
Thanks. Any questions on the Stabilization Brigade status? Okay. Next, we've got Onu's FCAPS. Saurav, if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Very quickly, the Onu FCAPS work has been progressing well. A lot of the AAA related ones have been dealt with, and we have DHCP ones that are in Get It as well right now. Folks are starting to look at IGMP related FCAPS, but yeah, so there is still some work left, but it's been going really well so far.
Thanks. Any questions from the group? Okay, and I may try and switch up the order next time we do updates so we can go more in depth on ones that got short time today. Do we have Matteo on the bridge?
Yeah, Mira.
Do you want to give a quick status update on the BBSIM Brigade?
Yeah, it'll be very quickly. We're working to get BBSIM stable and feature complete. We are in the process of rewriting it. We now have the very basic feature we need to test VOLTHA, meaning all the MCI state machine, EPOL, and DHCP. I sent out an email with the instruction to try it out last Friday on both the SIBA and VOLTHA mailing list. And we have the meetings at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time on Friday. And there is a lot of fun work that is waiting to be done by someone. So please come.
Thank you. Questions on this Brigade status update? Okay. And then I think that actually took us through everything, because we will be having a test automation brigade, but we don't have a dashboard or other items for that yet. So that is still in progress. So we are out of time. There were not a lot of new JIRAs to look at that were not related to current brigades. Let me go over quickly to the non-brigade dashboard. This is filtering out any of the future items, so you wouldn't see those. If I filter on the issues, there on the issue number, I see there is a defect that was opened. I've recently removed transaction timeout for non-active read-write core in a pair. That may go to stabilization. I'll leave that up to David. We have one from Zach on add or strip. The V prefix on Git tags applied to Golang projects. Another defect on device monitoring for setting affinity to the backend is broken in a router D. We have a resolved one. I think this was dropped. Moving affinity router from goal to go to a separate repo. We have a number of failure scenarios for testing. I believe those will be mapped over to other brigades. So I think we can gloss over those quickly here. And create Jenkins job to deploy physical pod using kind VOLTHA and Sanity end-to-end functional tests. Another resolved one. Was there a question? And then BBSIM move to active state takes greater than 5 minutes. We'll have to see if that belongs elsewhere. And then the unit testing for the API server. So that's a quick look. Yes.
Julie, for these things that are labeled failure scenario, are those labeled as stories? Shouldn't those be labeled as bugs? Seems to me a failure scenario means something's broken.
Let me take a look here.
If the ticket is to write the test for it,
Yeah.
it's not a bug.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, okay.
These
Tickets to
stories
write
are
the test. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that is a quick snapshot. If you have ones you'd like to look at in more detail, please let me know and I can add them to the agenda for next week, but that's or for Thursday. That's a quick look at the non-brigade related items that came in. And again, a number of these will move to that test automation brigade. And we are out of time. Last call for questions or comments, discussion before we drop today's bridge.
Julie, can I just make a quick announcement? This is
yes.
Just wanted to let everyone know, like people, there is I scheduled test automation brigade calls every Thursday starting this week at 8:30 PST AM. And I would like to invite everyone who will be working on testing to be there. And this is going to be the first call, so we can discuss about the strategies, and the agenda is there. So please feel free to add more items there, and then we can have the first call get going.
Great.
I've got one question for Suchitra. Suchitra, there were discussions that were kicked off on the VOLTHA stabilization stream before it got wrapped into the Surge initiative. And I was just wondering if you have received the outputs of those conversations and whether you're planning on leveraging those.
Yes, we do have those, and we can discuss further in this Thursday's call when we present the test strategy. So if there are any comments about it, we can definitely bring those up there.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Last call for questions or comments. Okay, and as we're moving to this new format for meetings, please again, let me know if you have feedback on something that works not as well as it could. If you have recommendations, just feel free to send me a note over email. We'll go ahead and drop today's bridge. Thanks everyone for your participation, and we will talk again soon. Thanks.